Look, I was entertained, and so were a lot of people when Elon Musk and Donald Trump were fighting it out on social media. I thought, man, this would make a pretty good social satire about tech billionaires and power. And then Jesse Armstrong, the guy who made Succession, he actually made one of those. Today, how Mountainhead meets the moment. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Look, I mean, the reaction to the very public breakdown of the relationship between Elon Musk and Donald Trump was pretty predictable, I think. Like, as soon as they started kind of like trashing each other, people just couldn't get enough of the feud. They were like waiting for the next tweet to be like, what are they going to say about each other? Also, there was just an endless stream of memes. Like, everyone was just making jokes. I'm not gonna lie to you, it was kind of a nice day to be online. It was always just also really useful when there's a big news moment that meets a nice kind of culture moment. Jesse Armstrong, who's famous for making Succession, he just put out a brand new satire about tech billionaires. It is called Mountainhead, and it comes at this time when not only Donald Trump and Elon Musk are going at it, but also the protests in LA are showing up on our feeds, and there's a direct relationship there too. Vinson Cunningham is here, Mike Isaac is here. Hello to both of you.
Hey, man, what's up?
Listen,
Thanks for having us.
it's a rough time out here, man. There's so much to talk about, but I think we got to set the scene a little bit before we even get to Mountainhead. Mike, I'll start with you here. You cover Silicon Valley. You've covered it for a long time, which means you've been reporting on Elon Musk for a while. Does it surprise you in any way?
Does it surprise me that Elon Musk had a breakdown online? Not a lot.
Okay.
I think he kind of goes on tilt every so often, and it was very funny as President Trump that morning that this all sort of happened. This clip started leaking out of him kind of saying things didn't go great. I'm sort of like over this guy or whatever. We've all seen Elon go on tilt enough times. I was just waiting for it. So what I didn't really anticipate is usually he's accustomed to getting his way, or at least being able to bully people with his bully pulpit on Twitter, and it going this hard, this fast, this crazy in one day was not exactly what I expected.
I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, I was in an all-day meeting that day, so I just kept getting texts me like, you gotta open your phone, man. You gotta open your phone. You gotta watch what's happening. And I think like there was like this reaction of, oh my God, this is the thing that is happening, because the richest man on the planet, who had been associated with the president of the United States for some time, I feel like there's been growing reports on the rift, on the ways like we disagree, but the way that they went about their disagreement was like they were fully trashing each other online. Vincent, when you were watching this, like how would you describe the way that we watched this falling out happen?
Well, I, like you, Elamin, I was in a conference in London, and when I got out, I had multiple texts, DMs. Every group chat I had was like 100 messages deep, being like, "Are you doing something about?" And so, and interestingly, the way to apprehend it was then also through like, okay, I'm going to go on X and look at all of Elon's tweets. I'm going to look at the screenshots of Truth Social to find out what Trump has said. I'm going to look at videos to see what Trump said in the Oval Office. So it was this like pilgrim's progress through media to find out what was actually going on.
Yeah, I think pilgrim's progress is a really good way to put it. I also will say that like we've all been on Twitter for a minute, and I feel like there was a time when Twitter used to be the place where, when a big story is unfolding, everyone is on it, and everyone's sort of like making the same kind of comments. This felt like that. This felt like sort of like a return to form of, oh, this is actually what the platform is kind of best for. But also, I don't want to understate the consequences of this, Mike. I feel like it's easy to sort of like look at the way that they're talking to one another and about one another and say, okay, that's contained and maybe entertainment, but the stakes are pretty serious. Like, Elon Musk has a lot of influence over public life in the United States, arguably the world, more than any private citizen has ever had. And I think like there is something about, knowing what you know about Elon Musk and his worldview and the way that he moves through the world. What do you think happens next from someone like Elon Musk?
Yeah, no, I agree. As insane and, dare I say, fun as that day was online, I agree with you. I think it was like a return to form of old Twitter. But like, you're exactly right. Like, these are two of the most powerful people in the world, with, one has the nuclear football in the corner and the other has, like, billions of dollars in capital to spend on rockets or satellite links that connect us around the world, or Teslas and self-driving cars. And there was an actual moment where, there's potential repercussions in space flight. Elon was saying, I'm going to decommission building this type of rocket. Like there were folks in the space industry who were like, hey, this spat might actually, set us back in the space race, which is insane because it was kind of like him taking his other football and going home.
Yeah.
But I think as far as what's next, I think Elon started to think better of it and is already. And my favorite part was him deleting the tweet saying he had a connection to the Epstein files, that Trump had a connection to the Epstein files, as if no one has not etched that in their brain by now. I really appreciated that.
Right. I mean, like this is what we saw unfold, right? It was like the very height of the feud. Like there's this moment where Elon Musk sort of tweets, "Oh, by the way, the real shocking story is that Donald Trump is associated with the Epstein files," and then he deleted that tweet as though not everyone in the world saw that tweet. Which is like I would do that if I was fighting with a neighbor. You know what I mean? I go like, "Oh, I don't want that record out there." But you at this point, how long has he been visible? It's we're all following the story very closely. It was a funny thing to go, no, let me just delete that. Nobody saw that. Don't worry about it. This is where I want to like Vincent, where I want to turn into Mountainhead, because Jesse Armstrong has this new satire. It's about tech billionaires who already kind of run the world, and then like there's this sense of it just. You watch the movie and it gives you this the thin line between people in power and then the people sort of pulling the strings behind them. And so let's just take a listen to some of the trailer.
All right. 4 presidents of tech. Get your net worth on!
This does not look like somebody who should have the keys to America.
The world wants your algorithm to stop being racist and shitty.
Things can't get any worse.
This is a terrifying experience, and I don't know that I'll ever recover.
First of all, just for anyone who's not seen the film Mountainhead, you should know that watching the entire thing feels like watching a nightmare, and it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. For anyone who's not seen it, Vincent, tell us a little bit more about the premise and how it can maybe help us understand the relationship between Elon Musk and Donald Trump.
Yeah. As you mentioned, it's by Jesse Armstrong. It's directed by Jesse Armstrong, who has created Succession, so obviously has an interest in this milieu. It's 4 billionaires in a house, a very expensive-looking, also disgusting-looking fortress, where they have basically a kind of like bro retreat where they compare their net worth. They kind of talk about the fate of the world. But the problem is that one of them, his name is Venice, even though it's kind of spelled like another E-N-I-S word. And this may remind you of someone we've been talking about. He is in charge of a huge social network, and he has just released changes that essentially unleash AI and all of its potential for dishonesty, et cetera, onto the world of politics. And the world is kind of on fire. There's all kinds of political unrest because of this new technology that he has unleashed kind of flippantly on his social platform. And so these billionaires watching the world burn, display all the hubris that you might imagine. Should we do a coup? Should we take over? I think I could call the president. It's their hubris is on 100% as the world kind of melts around them, and we see every possible foible, flaw, evidence of sociopathy that you could imagine.
I will say that like there was something compelling to me about starting the movie, and their hubris is already at the highest level it could be. And in my head, I was like, if you're writing this movie, I don't know where you go from here. And Jesse Armstrong's like, well, watch this. And he sort of like figures out how to sort of keep pushing that higher and higher. But the engine of the movie, before I get to you, Mike, the engine of the movie is the sort of like these alerts that keep coming in. Like, oh, there's unrest here, there's unrest here, there's unrest here. We go like from India to Argentina. Here's what's happening in London. Here's what's happening in Paris. Oh my God, the mayor of Paris has been shot. And like they have a sort of a reaction that is relatively cold, relatively cold to everyone. Like, oh, I'm seeing that some people in Paris are like, actually, this could be good, question mark. And then you're supposed to sort of like laugh at the absurdity of it. So when you see how all this unrest is depicted, Vincent, all the civil unrest around the world, and how truth ends up being distorted because of Tram, which is the social media platform that Venice owns, it's hard not to think about what's happening in Los Angeles right now and how it's playing out on our social feeds. What's the connection that you're seeing there?
Well, crucially, things play out similarly as you kind of have to understand the Trump-Musk fight as a way, like surfing the internet for what actually happened.
Yeah.
The unrest that we've seen, the protest movement that we've seen in LA, for most of us plays out in images. And how do we interpret the sight of flames? How do we interpret the sort of cloudy air of tear gas is so crucial. So on Fox News, of course, it's like another site of urban unrest and immigrant criminality and on and on and on. And for, I hope, most of the rest of us, it's about free people in a free nation, deciding how they want their neighbors to be treated. And a president who loves images, by the way, Donald Trump, does things with photographs in mind, trying to turn that into an image of unrest. So it's a really interesting interpretive battle that's happening.
Yeah, you sort of watch it. I think you watch this movie and say this is the most logical extension form of the sort of image-based culture that is manipulatable that we are currently in right now. Mike, this is in a way I think like exactly what Jesse Armstrong intended this movie for, right? Like it's like exactly this kind of moment, because he pitched this movie to HBO in November after Trump was elected. He wrote it in January and February, just as all these billionaires were like behind Donald Trump as he sort of gave his inauguration speech, and then he shot it in March and April, and it came out 2 weeks ago. You don't really get a movie in this kind of timeline very often, and you don't get something that is supposed to be this kind of directly kind of commentary. What does it add to your understanding of this moment, and even like right now with, I saw a headline this morning in the New York Times about the way that fake images are kind of spreading around as we watch the protests in LA and also the crackdown on those protests in LA.
I didn't even know that he did it on such a compressed timeline. That actually is really interesting to me. And I think like it's almost too perfect because this stuff happens so quickly. It's hard to even parody it sometimes because the way that these guys act a lot of the time is it's sort of like Armando Iannucci saying, I can't do Veep now because the current presidency is like too Veep, like how do I even do that?
Yeah.
Which I agree with. I think it's very hard to do parody well right now. The way that tech is shifting so quickly, the way that these sort of absurd moments become reality, and the way that, a lot of these billionaires relate to the world can be really hard to do well in fiction and in media. I think Jesse did a pretty good job. It's almost explicitly too over the top and dark in a way that works. One thing I will say is with the TV show Silicon Valley from HBO 10 years ago, these guys were kind of in on the joke out here. They laughed along with it because they're like, oh, it's ridiculous. And they kind of, they're parodying me. And, a lot of the tech CEOs went and talked directly to the writers. I don't feel like they're in on the joke anymore. I feel like this is not one that's really going to resonate with them in the same way.
Well, I feel like I find that compelling because, as I was watching this movie, and there's a moment in the movie where three of the guys go, should we just kill the fourth one? Is that sort of like the thing we should do? And they're going down the hallway and they're chanting Khashoggi, 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 in reference to Jamal Khashoggi, who was of course a journalist who was killed. And I had a sort of like out of body experience watching that because to them that would have been a news story of like, hey, of course you can do anything you want, kind of without consequences, like to these characters. And what I find kind of really compelling about this movie is that like the other engine of this movie, Mike, is that the MacGuffin, if you will, the Rami character has created an AI, and the simple thing that it does is just tell you what is true on the internet. And he continues to not release it to the public, and it's making the valuation of his company go up and up and up. And everybody else just wants that. There is something so beautifully poetic about being like, all you got to do is just give them something that can tell them what is true on the internet and what is not. Tell me about that, being like the thing that is so out of reach at this point that everyone is kind of after it, but they're not really even sure whether they want to use it or not.
No, it sort of to me, it explains the dynamics of a hyper capitalist mentality out here perfectly. I really think at the end of the day, it's about competition and like quote unquote letting the market sort it out that a lot of the people out here worship. And there's no more perfect market to corner than having the thing everyone wants and refusing to give it to them. And I think that and they get a little bit philosophically into like, should we have this, and should maybe accelerationism, speeding it all up is a good thing, but like it's obviously turned up to 11 on how these folks think, but perhaps not too much absurd, so I think it works.
Well, I think, Vincent, like the thing that I like doing is watching a satire and laughing, and I think like halfway through Mountainhead I was like, I don't think I'm laughing anymore. Like I think like it felt stressful to me, and I think like I turned to my partner at a certain point and I was like, I think your jaw has been on the floor for like a little longer than is comfortable as you watch this movie. Something about Mountainhead sort of activates, I think, all of our anxieties about the logical extension of what tech billionaires being this close to power could do. Why do you think this movie eventually turns not that fun to watch?
Well, I think that this is, if you think about Jesse Armstrong as a figure and maybe him creating something in response to something that he's done before, Succession, although there's a lot of unloveliness in that depiction of the rich, lots of frailty, stupidity, etc. But Kendall Roy, played by Jeremy Strong, even when he's being his most stupid, sometimes he's wearing some really nice linen. You know what I mean? Like there is a beauty to it. There is still that thing that we talk about where you can depict the rich even in critique, but there also is some glamour.
Yeah.
Mountainhead is the most unglamorous movie I've ever seen. It's like the most, Jason Schwartzman's characters, the house looks horrible. His canapes don't look appetizing.
No one wants to eat them. The whole time, no one wants to eat them. Yeah.
The only thing that's desirable in the movie is power, and they're using it in the wrong way. So that's sort of like, there is a sort of beady-eyed, like shark-like quality to the depiction that when it's like, oh, these people probably could do something like they want to do, it gets scary in a way that kind of runs on a parallel track to the reality that we're in, which, as Mike says, like only accelerates and gets stranger and stranger and stranger, almost like in a way that art can't keep up with.
Mike, what's your take on that? Why does this movie eventually you kind of go, I thought I was supposed to be having fun, and now I'm having a bad time. Why do you think that happens?
No, I had the same experience as y'all. Like, you go from, I relate to, I mean, not relate personally, but I relate to what I'm seeing on the screen there, to a real sour taste. And I think I kept looking over at my wife and saying, this is too real, like it's too real, it's hyper real, it's absurd, but like not too absurd. And like the thing that I've been beaten on for a long time covering this stuff is like, they are very powerful people who, because of the scale of the things that they control, even as we treat them as like playthings a lot of the time, I think influences us and folks in general on a more pervasive level than we might imagine. And I'm glad, I guess, art is now wrestling with that in a real way.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Vincent, what I was thinking about, as you do when you're trying to watch a movie, I was thinking about as I was watching Mountainhead is like this quote from Hannah Arendt, about this idea of how people in power, when they sort of get to this position, they can sometimes begin to see their lives of real people as pure instruments to some kind of other end. They sort of stop seeing the reality of people, and they start thinking about the instrumentalization of people. Like people are just instruments to some other goal. And I was really struck by that because of this exchange where, one of them was like, well, I guess we should just coup out the US, and which made me laugh. And then the other person was like, hang on, you want to do a coup d'etat on the most powerful military? And then the absurdity is very quickly undercut by one of them saying, well, I kind of have control over the software that powers most of the military. Without that, they're just a couple of people with some little guns, and we could use the drones that we built for them against them. And then that's when it stopped being fun for me, because like these people are able to game out, the possibility of like, oh, this is actually who has power in this particular situation. When you think about that, when you think about this idea of like people that close to power are actually maybe seeing real life people as pure instruments, what does that do to a democracy? Just a small question. But what do you think that does to a democracy? Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'm going to pitch very soon my sitcom Hannah Arendt on HBO. Well, there's also a moment in Mountainhead where the Musk-like character asks the Steve Carell character, "Do you believe in other people?"
Yes.
This idea of the non-rich, as they call them, non-player characters, NPCs.
Yeah.
And you see this with Elon Musk, like the cold-heartedness with which he cost so many federal workers their jobs, all for the optics of Doge. The way that the people in this movie want to go sort of, they keep on talking, we want to go transhuman.
Yeah.
Part of the reason is that the Steve Carell character is sick and he thinks that he can avoid his eventual fate by uploading his consciousness or whatever.
Yeah.
Elon Musk similarly wants to go interplanetary, and he doesn't care if many people die on the way for him to, whatever, stand alone, barrel chested on Mars. Who knows? So this has become, and even the way people talk about AI and the way just by nature it will, of course, take away all of the jobs and the livelihoods on which people depend. We are in a moment where suddenly the old-fashioned thing of, oh, every human being has intrinsic value that is not connected to wealth or some interplanetary end or whatever. These old-fashioned things need to be affirmed in a way that I think gives us some opportunities of things to talk about. But it's sad that these things need to be sort of reiterated in this moment.
Yeah, I think like that's a striking thing. That the idea of sort of how quickly you wake up and realize, oh, we've arrived at a place where at least some people who have some control over like the way that we interact with one another and see the world and can show us things that maybe are not true, they don't necessarily think about other people and the ways that consequences play out in their lives. I gotta say, Mike, this gave me pause, and I started to think, is this really how Silicon Valley thinks about people? And I would like to hope no, but also at the same time, satire is about sort of taking an idea to its most sort of logical or illogical extension. When you watch this movie, do you go, I recognize too much of that? Or do you go, no, we're still not quite there yet?
Well, as Vinson was talking, I know I had a very specific quote in mind from Musk, who has openly enunciated this idea, which I'm not quoting him exactly, but he said something to the effect of one of the fundamental flaws of humanity is an empathy for others in sort of ignoring like perhaps what the ultimate goal is, which is the survival of the species. And he portrayed what I think many, if hopefully not most people, see as a strength in humanity and the ability to, lift up or connect with your fellow humans. And I don't think that sentiment from him, he's particularly singular in how he enforces it, but I think that that's more common than you might imagine because of the way these men, generally men, think in long time horizons and have this great man theory of the internet and of tech and of how they are the ones that are gonna sort of save us all, even if not personally, if that makes sense, even if not saving you, just saving us in the abstract.
That's saving humanity in the abstract while maybe ruining some real life humans in actual practice. Right. Well, that's a lot to sit with. Like this idea of like, hey, fellas, is it a flaw in the source code of humanity to care about other people? Hard to say. Vincent, is it as bleak as it sounds? That was kind of a bleak question, I think, to leave it there.
End this on a high note, Vincent.
Yeah. You got 30 seconds, actually, though.
Thank you very much. Listen, as long as there are people, and this is maybe one of the solaces of comedy. As long as there are people who can recognize this and laugh, there are still people who can fight back. And we're seeing that in Los Angeles and now increasingly around the country.
Yeah.
We're seeing that right now. So as long as that's happening, there's a bigger picture than the bad source code.
Listen to that. That's, I think, you know what that sounds like? That sounds like hope to me. I really appreciate your time. You guys are the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
My name is Elamin. This show is called Commotion. We'll be back tomorrow. We'd love to see you then. Thank you.